How did a species with no shields, no plasma weapons, and no warp drive defeat two of the oldest empires in the universe? The Krell had perfect logic. The Zan had psychic power. But humanity? We had a shovel, a garage door opener, and the ability to lie to the face of a god. How humanity broke the math of the universe. The war had been going on for 1,000 years. It was not a war of anger, and it was not a war of passion. It was a war of cold, hard math. On one side of the galaxy sat the Krell Empire. The Krell were not living creatures, they were machines. They were made of shiny chrome, blue lights, and perfect logic. They did not feel pain, and they did not know fear. To them, the war was just a calculation. They wanted to bring order to the chaos of the universe. On the other side of the battle line stood the Zan. The Zan were the opposite of the Krell. They were a biological hive mind. They were giant insect-like monsters with hard shells and sharp claws. They did not use computers, they used a psychic connection. Every Zan soldier could hear the thoughts of the Queen. They moved like a single, giant ocean of teeth and hunger. The Zan wanted to consume all organic life to grow their hive. For 10 centuries, these two giants crashed against each other. The Krell fired plasma beams that could melt moons. The Zan spit acid that could eat through starship hulls. But neither side could win. The problem was that they were both too perfect. The Krell supercomputers could predict exactly where the Zan would attack. The Zan psychic web could sense exactly when the Krell were coming. It was a stalemate. A stalemate is when two players in a game cannot move without losing. The battle lines froze. Every year, millions of drones and millions of bugs died, but the map of the galaxy never changed. The war became boring. It became a waste of resources. The stars themselves seemed tired of watching the same fight over and over again. The Krell Overseer, a massive computer brain, ran the numbers a billion times a day. The result was always the same, 50% chance of victory, 50% chance of defeat. The machines hated this. They needed a 100% chance. They needed a new variable. Then, a Krell scout ship drifted into a quiet, unimportant corner of the galaxy. It was looking for raw minerals to build more soldiers. Instead, it found a small, watery planet orbiting a yellow sun. The planet was called Earth. The scout ship scanned the surface and found a species called humans. The Krell analysis was disappointing. Humans were soft. They had no natural armor on their skin. They could die from heat, cold, bacteria, or simply falling down. They were incredibly fragile. Their technology was even worse. The Krell used energy weapons and anti-gravity drives. The humans were still using projectile weapons. They used small explosions to throw little pieces of lead metal at each other. They called them guns. To the Krell, this was ancient history. It was like fighting a spaceship with a stick. The Krell Overseer processed this new data. These humans were weak, and their weapons were garbage. However, there were billions of them. They reproduced quickly, and they were aggressive. The Krell logic circuits came up with a cruel plan. They did not need the humans to win. They needed the humans to die. The plan was simple. The Krell would recruit the humans and send them to the front lines. The Zan loved to eat biological meat. If the Krell threw the human fleet at the Zan, the giant bugs would be distracted. The Zan would spend days eating the humans. While the Zan were busy feasting on the easy prey, the Krell machines could flank them and finally break the stalemate. The humans were not soldiers, they were bait. The Krell fleet arrived in Earth's orbit. They did not come with offers of friendship. They blocked out the sun with their massive, geometric ships. They broadcasted a message to every television and radio on Earth. The message was cold and direct: join us, or be destroyed. The Krell expected the humans to panic. They expected crying and begging. But the humans did something strange. They looked up at the sky, and they did not run. The world leaders of Earth spoke together. They realized they had no choice. If they fought the Krell now, Earth would be vaporized. So, they agreed to join the war. However, the humans did not act like victims. They started preparing with a strange energy. They took their old, blocky ships and welded metal plates onto them. They loaded crates of their primitive bullets and missiles. They painted strange pictures on their ships, sharks with open mouths, skeletons, and pin-up girls. The Krell drones watched this and found it inefficient. Paint does not add structural integrity. It was a waste of time. But the Krell did not care. Dead things do not need to look professional. The day of deployment arrived. The human fleet was massive, but it looked like a junk pile compared to the elegant Krell cruisers. The Krell commanded the human leader, a man named Commander Jack, to take his fleet to Sector 9. Sector 9 was known as the graveyard. It was where the fighting was the thickest. No fleet had held Sector 9 for more than a week. Proceed to coordinates, the Krell commanded. Hold position. Do not retreat. You will serve the logic. Commander Jack stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Earth's Fury. He chewed on a cigar, which was a stick of burning leaves that humans inhaled for some illogical reason. He looked at the perfect, shiny Krell ships, and then he looked at the dark void of Sector 9. The Krell saw a disposable resource. They saw numbers on a screen. They calculated that the human fleet would be destroyed in 6 hours. The human ships ignited their engines. They burned dirty chemical fuel that left trails of smoke in space. They moved clumsily toward the war zone. The Krell overseer turned its attention away. The variable had been deployed. The math said the humans would die, the Zan would feed, and the Krell would finally advance. The machines were satisfied with their logic. But the machines made one critical error. They had calculated the strength of human steel, but they had never calculated the stubbornness of a human soul. The variable was about to change the equation in ways the machines could never predict. Sector 9 was a dark and terrifying place. It was filled with the broken remains of thousands of ships. Floating metal and frozen bodies drifted in the silence of deep space. This was where the Krell sent the human fleet to die. The Krell overseer watched from a safe distance, millions of miles away. Its sensors were locked onto the small, ugly ships of the human fleet. The computer calculated the odds. It predicted that the humans would last exactly 45 minutes against the Zan. After that, the biological monsters would eat them, and the Krell would make their move. The Zan fleet appeared out of the darkness like a swarm of angry wasps. Their ships were not made of metal. They were grown from flesh and bone. They pulsed with a gross, purple light. They were massive, living creatures that could travel through stars. The Zan hive mind sensed the fresh meat. It felt the heartbeats of the humans inside the metal cans. The hive mind sent a psychic command to its drones, feast. The Zan ships opened their giant mouths, ready to swallow the human fleet whole. According to Krell logic, the humans should have stopped their engines. They should have formed a defensive circle and fired their weapons in fear while they waited to be destroyed. That was the logical thing for a weak species to do. The Krell sent a message to Commander Jack. Hold your position, the machine voice said. Create a distraction. Do not advance. Commander Jack stood on the bridge of the Earth's Fury. He listened to the robot voice, and then he looked at the wall of monsters approaching him. He did not like being told to wait. He did not like being told to die. He grabbed the microphone that connected him to every ship in the human fleet. He did not give a speech about honor or duty. He just gave one order. All ships, Jack said calmly. Ramming speed. Drive them closer so I can hit them with my sword. The Krell computers immediately flashed red warnings. This action was not in the database. A weak force does not charge a strong force. It was suicide. But the humans did not care about the math. Their engines roared to life, pushing their ships past the safety limits. The human fleet did not form a neat line. They scattered like a pack of wild dogs, flying erratically and unpredictably. The Zan hive mind paused. For 1,000 years, the Krell machines had fought in perfect patterns. The Zan knew exactly where the lasers would come from. But these new enemies were different. They were not moving in a pattern. They were moving with madness. The Zan hesitated. Their biological brains were trying to understand why the food was attacking the eater. In nature, the mouse runs from the cat. The mouse does not jump into the cat's face. This split second of confusion was all the humans needed. The human ships crashed into the Zan lines. They did not stop at a safe distance to fire missiles. They flew right up to the giant biological ships. Some human ships actually slammed their metal bodies into the soft flesh of the enemy vessels. Then, the humans unleashed their primitive weapons. The Krell used lasers. Lasers are hot and clean. They burn a hole, and the heat closes the wound instantly. It is a polite way to kill. Humans used bullets. They used heavy machine guns that fired large pieces of lead. When a bullet hit the Zan ships, it did not just burn, it ripped, tore, and shattered. The Zan were not ready for this kind of pain. The bullets punched through their organic armor and bounced around inside, causing massive internal damage. The Zan ships started to bleed into space. Then, the humans did something even crazier. They fired boarding pods. These were small metal tubes filled with soldiers. They shot these pods directly through the skin of the Zan ships. The human soldiers burst out inside the enemy vessels. The Zan drones were terrifying monsters with claws, but they were used to fighting machines. They were not used to fighting crazy primates with shotguns and flamethrowers. Inside the living ships, the battle was brutal. The corridors were narrow and dark. The humans used fire. The Zan hated fire. It terrified them on a primal level. The humans used loud grenades that shook the sensitive organs of the aliens. The Zan relied on a psychic connection to fight as one unit. But the explosions, the screaming, and the sheer chaos of the human attack broke their concentration. The hive mind could not control its soldiers. The individual Zan drones panicked. They started running into walls or attacking each other in their confusion. Back at the Krell headquarters, the overseer was experiencing a critical failure. The screens were filled with error messages. Logic error, the screen flashed. Probability impossible. The computer predicted a 0% chance of human victory. Yet, the sensors showed the Zan fleet falling apart. The massive biological ships were drifting dead in space, their insides destroyed by the tiny, angry humans. In less than 1 hour, the battle for Sector 9 was over. The Zan fleet was destroyed. The human fleet had taken damage, but they were still flying. Commander Jack lit another cigar and looked at the debris floating outside his window. He opened the channel to the Krell overseer. "Sector 9 is clear," Jack said. "Send us the coordinates for the next target. And try to find us a real fight next time." The Krell overseer did not know how to respond. Its processors were overheating. It had expected the humans to be a variable of weakness. Instead, it had found a variable of chaos. The machines realized they had made a mistake. They thought they were using the humans. But looking at the burning wreckage of the Zan fleet, the Krell began to wonder if they had just unleashed something they could not control. The math had failed, and for the first time in 1,000 years, the war was unpredictable. The Krell machines were still processing the data from the first battle. Their processors were running hot, trying to understand how a primitive species with projectile weapons had defeated a superior enemy. The math simply did not add up. According to the Krell, the humans should have died. Since the humans refused to die in space, the Krell decided to send them to a place where survival was mathematically impossible. They ordered the human fleet to land on planet XJ-22. Planet XJ-22 was not a world meant for life. It was a ball of volcanic rock, choking ash, and rivers of lava. The air was toxic, filled with sulfur that smelled like rotten eggs and burned the lungs. The gravity was heavy, making every step feel like walking through deep mud. The Krell had been trying to hold this planet for 100 years because it was rich in energy crystals, but the Xan always pushed them back. The environment destroyed robot joints and melted sensor arrays. The Krell logic was cold and simple: if the machines could not hold this hellish world, the soft, fleshy humans would definitely fail. The Krell dropped the human soldiers onto the surface and waited for them to suffocate or surrender. Commander Jack and his troops stepped off their transport ships. The heat hit them immediately. It was hot enough to blister skin, but the humans did not retreat to the comfort of their ships. They looked at the burning horizon, wiped the sweat from their foreheads, and started to work. The Krell expected them to build high-tech shields or domes. Instead, the humans grabbed shovels and pickaxes. They started digging holes in the ground. They called them trenches. The Krell overseer watched the satellite feed with confusion. Digging into the ground seemed counterproductive. It restricted movement. It was dirty. It was primitive. But the humans kept digging. They created a complex network of tunnels and bunkers deep in the volcanic rock. They reinforced the walls with sandbags and scrap metal. They did not try to conquer the planet, they became part of the planet. They hunkered down in the mud and ash, weapons ready, waiting for the enemy to come to them. The Xan army arrived 3 days later. They descended from the sky in organic drop pods that looked like giant, throbbing eggs. When the eggs hit the ground, they burst open, releasing thousands of warrior drones. These Xan were different from the spacefaring ones. They were armored like beetles, with extra legs for scurrying over the rocky terrain. They screeched a terrible sound that echoed off the canyon walls. They sensed the humans hiding in the ground and charged forward, confident that they would flush the soft prey out of their holes. The battle that followed was one of the ugliest in the history of the war. The Xan charged in waves, climbing over the dead bodies of their own kind to reach the human lines. The humans fired their machine guns until the barrels glowed red with heat. The noise was deafening. But the Xan kept coming. They were endless. Slowly, the humans began to run out of ammunition. In a logical war, this is the moment of surrender. When a soldier has no bullets, he is no longer useful. The Krell computers calculated that the humans would now flee or beg for mercy. But the humans introduced a new variable that the aliens had never encountered before: spite. Spite is a very specific human emotion. It is the desire to hurt the enemy even if it hurts you. It is the refusal to let the other guy win, simply because you hate him. When the humans ran out of bullets, they did not drop their weapons. They fixed sharp metal blades, called bayonets, to the ends of their guns. When the blades broke, they used the heavy stocks of their rifles as clubs. When the rifles shattered, they used their heavy engineering shovels. The Xan drones leaped into the trenches, expecting fear. Instead, they found exhausted, dirty, and furious humans who attacked them with rocks, helmets, and bare fists. A Xan warrior would stab a human with a claw, expecting the human to fall. But the human would grab the claw, pull the monster closer, and bite its throat out. It was madness. The humans were fighting with a level of savagery that frightened the hive mind. They were not fighting to live anymore, they were fighting to make sure the Xan died. Sensing that physical force was not working fast enough, the Xan Queen decided to use her ultimate weapon. She unleashed a massive psychic scream. This was a mental wave of pure terror projected across the battlefield. Usually, this scream caused enemy armies to drop their weapons and curl up on the ground in a fetal position, paralyzed by their worst nightmares. The invisible wave of fear hit the human lines. The soldiers froze for a second. They saw visions of death and darkness. Their hearts raced. But the Xan did not understand human biology. When a human feels extreme fear, their brain dumps a chemical called adrenaline into their blood. This chemical does not always make them freeze. It often makes them faster, stronger, and more aggressive. It triggers the fight or flight response, and for these humans, the switch was stuck on fight. The psychic scream did not break them. It woke them up. The fear turned instantly into pure, white-hot rage. The tired humans suddenly found a new burst of energy. They screamed back at the aliens, a collective roar of defiance that drowned out the noise of the battlefield. They climbed out of their trenches and charged at the Zan. The Zan were terrified. They were psychic creatures, and they could feel the minds of their enemy. They expected to feel submission. Instead, they felt a chaotic storm of anger and spite. It was painful for the Zan to be near it. The humans were like walking mental bombs. The Zan drones began to retreat, scrambling back over the lava flows to get away from the crazy primates who fought harder when they were hurt. The Krell overseer watched in silence as the impossible planet was secured. The humans stood on top of piles of dead insect monsters, cheering and waving their shovels in the toxic air. They were bleeding, burned, and exhausted, but they held the ground. The Krell updated their database with a new note on human behavior: warning, high damage tolerance. Do not intimidate. Fear increases combat effectiveness. The variable of spite had turned a certain defeat into a victory, and the logic of the war was broken once again. The war had changed. The Zan were no longer treating the humans like a nuisance, they were treating them like a virus. The biological aliens had realized that the small, soft creatures from Earth were dangerous because they were unpredictable. The Zan hive mind decided that it was time to stop playing games. They decided to end the human threat once and for all. To do this, they summoned their greatest weapon, a ship so large that it had its own gravity. The humans called it the World Eater. The World Eater was not just a ship, it was a living moon. It arrived in the sector with a slow, terrifying grace. Its surface was covered in billions of twitching eyes and massive tentacles that could crush a battleship like a soda can. When it entered the system, it blocked out the light of the local sun. The radiation from its biological engines was so strong that it made the lights on the human ships flicker and die. The Krell sensors immediately analyzed the threat. The result was a catastrophe. The Krell supercomputers calculated that the human fleet had exactly zero chance of survival. The weapons on the human ships could not even scratch the skin of the World Eater. The Krell overseer sent an urgent message to Commander Jack. The machine's voice was fast and urgent. It ordered the humans to retreat immediately. The Krell logic was sound: there is no point in fighting a battle you cannot win. It is better to run away and save the resources for another day. The Krell unlocked the warp gates, creating a safe path for the humans to escape. They expected the humans to turn their ships around and flee in terror. Commander Jack sat in his captain's chair and looked at the blinking red light of the retreat order. He looked at the giant monster ship filling his view screen. He knew the Krell were right. His guns were useless here. His missiles were like throwing pebbles at a mountain. But Jack also knew that if they ran now, the Zan would hunt them down forever. He took a long drag from his cigar and reached for the communication switch. He did not switch it to receive. He switched it to mute. He cut off the connection to the Krell. The bridge crew of the Earth's Fury looked at their commander. They were afraid, but they trusted him. Jack turned to his communications officer, a young woman named Sarah. He asked her if the fleet's long-range broadcasting array was fully operational. She nodded. Jack smiled a smile that did not look happy, it looked dangerous. He explained that they were not going to shoot the enemy with bullets today. They were going to shoot them with noise. The Zan hive mind was a powerful tool. It connected every single Zan drone to the Queen. It allowed them to move and fight as one perfect organism. However, Jack realized that this connection was also their greatest weakness. It was like a radio signal. If the signal was clear, the army was perfect. But if the signal was jammed, the army would become confused. The Krell tried to jam the signal with math and computer code, which never worked because the Zan were biological. Jack decided to jam it with something purely human, chaos. Commander Jack ordered every ship in the fleet to point their communication dishes at the World Eater. He handed a small data drive to Sarah. It contained a digital file of ancient Earth music. It was a genre called heavy metal. It was fast, loud, aggressive, and completely lacking in logic. It was just raw noise and anger. Jack gave the order. "Turn the volume up to maximum," he said. "Let's break their ears." The human fleet did not fire a single shot. Instead, they blasted a wall of sound across the vacuum of space. Of course, there is no sound in space, but they were transmitting the data on every radio frequency the Zan used. The Zan's psychic receivers picked up the signal instantly. To the Zan, who were used to the quiet, orderly whispers of the hive mind, this was like a bomb going off inside their brains. The screaming guitars and thundering drums of the human music flooded their neural network. The effect was instant and terrifying. On board the World Eater, the Zan Queen shrieked in pain. The chaotic noise drowned out her commands. She tried to tell her drones to fire, but they could not hear her over the aggressive human music tearing through their minds. The connection between the Queen and her soldiers snapped. Suddenly, millions of Zan drones were no longer part of a single, smart army. They were just millions of confused, wild animals locked in a dark room. Panic took over the alien fleet. The smaller Zan escort ships stopped moving in formation. They started drifting into each other. Without the Queen's control, the biological weapons systems on the World Eater malfunctioned. The massive tentacles began to thrash wildly, smashing into the Zan's own support ships. The giant cannons, which were meant to destroy the humans, started firing randomly into deep space, or worse, into their own hull. The Krell overseer watched the sensors in total disbelief. The machine could not understand what was happening. The human fleet was just sitting there, doing nothing but broadcasting rhythmic vibrations. Yet, the enemy was destroying itself. The Zan drones, driven mad by the isolation and the noise, started attacking each other. They saw their own brothers as enemies. The interior of the World Eater became a war zone as the drones tore each other apart in a frenzy of confusion. For 10 minutes, the chaos continued. The human music played on a loop, a relentless storm of sound that refused to let the hive mind reconnect. Finally, the massive biological engine of the World Eater ruptured. The great beast let out a final, silent scream that rippled through space, and then it began to collapse. The monster ship died, killed not by a superweapon, but by a song. Commander Jack signaled for the music to stop. Silence returned to the sector. The Zan fleet was in ruins, floating dead in the dark. The Krell finally re-established contact. The overseer asked for a status report, demanding to know what advanced sonic weapon the humans had developed. Jack just laughed and leaned back in his chair. He told the machine that it wasn't a weapon, it was just a little bit of culture. The Krell recorded the victory, but their circuits were troubled. They realized that the humans didn't just break the rules of war, they ignored them completely. The chaos strategy had worked, but it proved that humanity was a variable too dangerous to predict. The war had stopped being a battle for territory. It had become a battle for survival. The Zan were no longer fighting the Krell machines, they were focused entirely on the humans. The biological monsters realized that as long as the humans existed, the hive mind was not safe. The humans were too loud, too chaotic, and too stubborn. So, the Zan made a decision that shook the galaxy. They pulled every single ship from every corner of their empire. They abandoned their borders and their colonies. They gathered into one massive, dark cloud of ships, billions of miles wide, and set a course for Earth. The Krell overseer watched this movement on its sensors. The machine logic was quick to calculate the outcome. The Zan fleet was bringing enough firepower to turn the entire solar system into dust. The Earth had no shield strong enough to stop them. The human fleet was broken and battered from the previous battles. They had no missiles left, and their ships were held together by tape and hope. The Krell supercomputer did the math. Probability of Earth survival was 0.0000%. The Krell decided to cut their losses. They sent a message to Commander Jack saying that the alliance was over. The Krell fleet engaged their warp drives and ran away, leaving the humans alone to die. Commander Jack stood in the command center on Earth. He looked at the giant screen on the wall. The sky was no longer blue, it was blocked out by the shadows of the Zan ships. They hung in the atmosphere like grim reapers waiting to swing their scythes. The sun was gone. The birds had stopped singing. The entire planet was silent, waiting for the end. Jack looked at his officers. They were tired. They were shaking. They knew there was no way to fight this. If they fired every gun on Earth, it would not make a dent in that fleet. "Sir," the communications officer whispered. "The Zan Queen is hailing us. She wants to watch us scream before she gives the order to fire." Jack adjusted his uniform. He picked up a small, black remote control from the table. It was an old device, a piece of junk he had found in a drawer. It was actually a garage door opener for a car that didn't run anymore. He held it tightly in his hand. "Put her on screen," Jack said. "And make sure the camera is focused on my face. Don't let them see your fear." The screen flickered, and the face of the Zan Queen appeared. She was terrifying. She was the size of a building, a pulsating mass of brain tissue and sharp teeth. Her many eyes stared directly at Jack. "Variable," she hissed, her voice sounding like wet gravel. "You are alone. The machines have fled. You have no weapons. Prepare to be consumed." Jack did not blink. He did not look at the floor. He stared right into the monster's eyes and smiled. It was the coldest smile anyone had ever seen. He held up the small black remote control so the Queen could see it. He rested his thumb on the button. "You're right," Jack said calmly. "We don't have any weapons left to fight you. But we do have this." He waved the garage door opener. "This connects to the Earth's core. We buried a bomb down there. A big one. It's a doomsday device. It doesn't just blow up the planet. It creates a chain reaction that burns the fabric of space itself. If I press this button, Earth dies. But the explosion will be so big, it will take the entire solar system with it. It will wipe out your entire fleet in 1 second." The Queen paused. The Zan hive mind rippled with confusion. This data was new. "You lie," the Queen growled. "No species would destroy their own home. It is against the instinct of survival. If you press that, you die too." "We are humans," Jack said, leaning closer to the camera. "Have you seen our history? We do stupid things all the time. We are spiteful. We are crazy. We would rather burn in hell together than let you win. So, go ahead. Fire your lasers. The moment I see a single shot, I press this button, and we all turn to ash." It was the greatest lie ever told. There was no bomb. There was no chain reaction. There was just a tired man with a garage door opener. In deep space, the Krell computers were monitoring the transmission. They analyzed Jack's statement. Probability of bluff, 100%, the machines calculated. Logic dictates self-preservation. The Krell knew it was a lie because it made no sense to commit suicide. But the Zan were not machines. They were biological. They understood fear. They looked at the data they had collected on humans. They remembered the soldiers charging with shovels. They remembered the madness of the heavy metal music. They remembered that humans fought harder when they were hurt. The Zan Queen looked at Jack's eyes. She saw madness there. She realized that this creature was actually crazy enough to do it. The humans were the only species in the galaxy irrational enough to choose death over defeat. The Queen felt a chill run through her massive body. She had brought her entire species here. If the human pressed that button, the Xan race would go extinct. It was a risk she could not take. The silence stretched for a minute. Jack's thumb hovered over the button. He didn't shake. He didn't sweat. He held the pose of a madman perfectly. "You are insane," the Queen finally whispered. "Try me," Jack replied. The Queen screeched an order to her fleet. "Retreat. Move. Get away from the madman." The massive cloud of alien ships turned around. They did not withdraw slowly, they ran. They engaged their engines and scattered in every direction, terrified of the imaginary bomb. Within 10 minutes, the sky was clear. The sun shone down on Earth again. The sensors showed the Xan fleet warping out of the galaxy, heading for the deep void where no one could find them. Jack stood still until the screen went black. Then, his legs gave out, and he collapsed into his chair. He looked at the garage door opener in his hand and laughed. It was a nervous, shaky laugh. His officers looked at him with wide eyes. "Sir," one of them asked. "Was there really a bomb?" Jack tossed the remote to the officer. "Check the batteries," he said. "It's dead." The Krell returned a few hours later. They were confused. Their logic circuits could not process how a lie had defeated an armada. They asked Commander Jack for the schematics of the Omega device. Jack just told them that it was a classified human secret. The Krell accepted this, but deep down, their circuits learned a new fear. They realized that logic is powerful, but it has limits. It cannot calculate the power of a bluff. The humans had won the war not with firepower, but with a poker face. The silence that followed the Great Retreat was the loudest sound Earth had ever heard. For days, the people of Earth did not celebrate. They just watched the sky, waiting for the nightmare to come back. They checked their radars and their telescopes, but the stars remained empty. The Xan, the terrifying biological eaters of worlds, were truly gone. They had run so fast and so far that they had left the known galaxy entirely. Slowly, the fear turned into relief, and the relief turned into a party that spanned the entire globe. In every city, people danced in the streets, not because they were strong, but because they were still alive. While Earth celebrated, the Krell Empire was in a state of panic. The machines returned to Earth's orbit, but they did not act like superiors anymore. They moved their ships slowly and carefully. They requested permission to land. This was strange behavior for the Krell. For 1,000 years, they had viewed organic life as weak and inefficient. But now, their logic circuits were filled with doubt. They had watched the humans do the impossible. They had seen a primitive species defeat a superior enemy using shovels, loud music, and a lie. The Krell supercomputers ran the simulation of the war 1 trillion times, and every time, the math said the humans should have lost. The fact that the humans won broke the Krell's understanding of the universe. A delegation of Krell leaders landed in the capital city of Earth. They were tall, silver robots with glowing blue eyes. They walked stiffly into the meeting room where Commander Jack was waiting. Jack did not look like a galactic conqueror. He was wearing a dirty uniform, he needed a shave, and he was eating a sandwich. The Krell sat down opposite him. They placed a small holographic device on the table. It projected a graph showing a flat line. "We have scanned your planet," the head Krell said, its voice robotic and confused. "We have scanned the core. We have scanned the mantle. We have scanned every military base. There is no Omega device. There is no bomb that can destroy the solar system. You possess no weapon capable of harming the Xan fleet." Jack wiped a crumb from his lip and smiled. "I know," he said simply. The robot's eyes flashed rapidly. "Then why did the Xan retreat? Our data shows that the probability of a bluff working on a hive mind is less than 1%. Why did you take that risk? If they had fired, you would be dead. Logic dictates that survival is the most important instinct. Your action was illogical. That is why we won, Jack replied, leaning back in his chair. You machines play chess. You make the best move based on the rules. The Zan play by instinct. They follow the rules of nature. But humans? We don't play by the rules. We flip the table. We change the game. I didn't calculate the odds of the bluff working. I just looked at the queen and thought, she looks nervous. That's not math. That's a gut feeling. The Krell looked at each other. The concept of a gut feeling did not exist in their code. They realized something terrifying. They could never beat the humans in a war. If the Krell fought the humans, the machines would try to use logic to predict the humans' moves. But since humans acted without logic, the machines would always be one step behind. To the Krell, humanity was not just a species, it was a glitch in the system. It was a variable that could not be solved. We propose a treaty, the head Krell said, its voice sounding almost humble. The Krell Empire wishes to form a permanent alliance with Earth. We will provide you with advanced technology. We will give you warp drives, plasma shields, and medical fabricators. We will build you cities of glass and light. In exchange, we ask for only one thing. And what is that? Jack asked. Protection, the robot said. The universe is full of chaos. There are other threats in the dark. We, the Krell, are perfect at order. But we cannot handle chaos. You are the masters of chaos. We want you to stand between us and the things that do not make sense. We want you to be the variable that scares the rest of the galaxy. Jack thought about it. The humans were tired of fighting, but they liked the idea of having high-tech spaceships. Deal, Jack said, shaking the cold metal hand of the robot. In the years that followed, the galaxy changed. Humanity leaped forward in technology by thousands of years overnight. They built a new fleet, sleek and powerful, combining Krell engineering with human creativity. But they didn't need to use it often. The story of the war had spread to every star system. Every alien race had heard the rumors. They heard about the species that fought with shovels. They heard about the sound weapons that drove a hive mind crazy. And most of all, they heard about the Omega bomb. Nobody knew that the bomb was a lie. The Krell never told anyone because they wanted the galaxy to be afraid of their new friends. The rumors grew wilder. Aliens whispered that humans were insane, that they had a button on their desk that could delete the universe if they had a bad day. When a human ship entered a sector, pirates and warlords would immediately surrender. They didn't want to find out if the rumors were true. Humanity became the peacekeepers of the galaxy. They were the sheriffs of the stars. They patrolled the borders, ensuring that trade flowed and wars stopped before they started. The Krell managed the economy and the logistics, keeping everything running smoothly. The humans handled the disputes. Whenever two alien empires got ready to fight, a human ship would show up. The human captain would just get on the radio and say, "Don't make me come over there." Usually, that was enough. Commander Jack retired as a hero. He spent his days fishing on a quiet lake. One day, a young Krell student came to visit him. The robot was writing a history of the war and wanted to understand the final variable. "Commander," the robot asked. "If the Zan Queen had called your bluff, if she had fired, what was your backup plan?" Jack cast his fishing line into the water and watched the bobber float. He laughed softly. "There was no backup plan, kid. If she fired, we were all dead. That's the funny thing about being human. Sometimes, you just have to bet everything on a pair of twos and hope the other guy blinks." The robot recorded the answer, but it still didn't understand. And that was fine. The galaxy didn't need to understand humans. It just needed to respect them. Humanity had started as the weakest variable in a war of giants, but in the end, they proved that in a universe of cold logic, the most dangerous thing of all is a little bit of crazy.